Welcome to The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Serrett. Barack Hussein Obama, the 44th President of the United States and the first African American to occupy the White House. His presidency became mired in controversy when a number of researchers and political opponents alleged that Obama was not eligible under the Constitution to be president because he is not, they claim, a natural-born U.S. citizen. Further, the leaders of this birther movement, as it became known, charged that the president and his aides produced forged documents, including a long-form birth certificate. The birthers also claim the president has spent millions of dollars in legal fees in an attempt to keep his college records under seal. Tonight we'll meet two attorneys, including the former Deputy Attorney General of Pennsylvania and a technology businessman and web expert, who all contend that President Obama is not eligible to be president. An imposter in the White House, if you will. We'll also meet a skeptic who maintains the motive of these birthers is fueled by toxic partisanship, ignorance, and perhaps even racism. Me? I just want the truth, and I'm willing to follow it wherever it leads. I do solemnly swear. It is time to redefine reality. Genetic enigma, a human alien. That's how cynical I am now about the process. Mainstream media, they've thrown in the towel. Weather patterns are yes, they're gonna make it. Has been engineered by the Illuminati.
I shouldn't even call him president. I should call him Resident Obama. Obama has no business being in the White House. He's not constitutionally eligible to be president. And it's the biggest hoax against the United States of America in our history over 320 years. The constitutional requirement to be president of the United States is that you must be natural-born citizen. Except for the initial presidents, I think there were some waivers because some of them obviously weren't born here. Now, natural-born is a term that has different interpretations by different people. Basically, it says this: if both parents are U.S. citizens and they have a child, that child is natural-born.
Okay, in my opinion, based on Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5, which is the eligibility clause, President Obama is not legally qualified to be the President and Commander-in-Chief of the United States because of the natural-born citizen clause. First of all, there are two standards. There's two classes of citizens that was established by the Founding Fathers. One is called a natural-born citizen. The other one is called a citizen of the United States. Basically, anybody who's a citizen who's not a natural-born citizen is a citizen of the United States. So when they wrote the clause, they said, if you're a citizen of the United States and you have that status as of the time of the adoption of the Constitution, then you're eligible to be president. The reason for that is that no one was a natural-born citizen. They were natural-born subjects of the king. They were born in the colonies. The founders said, okay, if you're a citizen, you can be president. But in the future, you have to be a natural-born citizen. And basically what that was for posterity. So children that were born to citizens of the United States became your natural-born citizens. So anybody that was born after July 4, 1776 could qualify to be a natural-born citizen because the parents would have been citizens of the United States through a naturalization process.
We get in a different situation, like Obama's, when only one parent is a U.S. citizen. He was supposedly born August 4th, 1961. He claims Hawaii. I can go through that in a minute. But only one of his parents was a U.S. citizen.
His mother was born in Kansas, probably a natural-born citizen.
His father, as we all know, was not.
The father came from Kenya. When his father was born, Kenya was a British colony. And the British Nationality Act of 1948 controlled his status as to his citizenship. Anybody born in Kenya, which was a British colony, was considered under the Act of 1948 a British subject or citizen. Barack Obama was born, his father was a British natural-born subject. Again, He doesn't have a U.S. citizen father. He has a U.S. citizen mother.
I think it was in June 2008, they put this certificate of live birth up on the campaign website. And it was just, when you first looked at it, I mean, you didn't even need an expert on there. You could see it was a phony. Now, they keep trying to say he was born in Hawaii. I am so sure if I had $1 million, I'd put it here on the table, or even $10 million, that Obama was not born in Hawaii. We have his step-grandmother, Sarah Obama, in Swahili. Now, it was set up, there's a ministry that is based here in the United States. One of the ministers was here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where our state capital is. The other minister was at her home, at Sarah Obama's home, in Mombasa, Kenya, Africa, sitting next to her. And we had a telephone hookup on that. And she speaks only in Swahili, and these ministers can translate. So we also have the audio, but we also have the affidavits from both these ministers. And she states in Swahili, which was translated, that August 4th, 1961, she was in the hospital in Mombasa, Kenya, when Obama was born there. Now, that's pretty tough to overcome that.
Well, I think that they're just a bit silly, and I wonder if they would be doing it if President Obama were white.
It's been suggested that his paternal grandmother on several occasions has stated publicly that she was there and attended the birth of her grandson, Barack Obama, in a hospital in Kenya.
Well, I think it's likely that she was confused. No one in their right mind would go from Hawaii, which had a first-class American medical system, to give birth in a country far away that didn't have that good of a medical system.
Okay, in one respect, it doesn't matter where he is born, whether it's Kenya, whether it's Hawaii. In another respect, it does matter.
His father was there on a scholarship. They wouldn't have had the money for airfare like that, even if they'd wanted to.
Why does it matter? Because to be a natural-born citizen, you have to satisfy two elements. Place of birth, which is the United States, and, that's an and, citizen parents. So if you're not born in the United States, you would not be a natural-born citizen.
In 1790, they had a Naturalization Act. And in that act, they quite specifically said that someone was an American citizen if their parents were American and they were born outside the country. And it's ironic now that we have this controversy because Mitt Romney's father, George Romney, ran for the Republican nomination a number of years ago, and everyone knew he was born in Mexico of American parents, and the Congressional Research Service looked into it and said there's no problem. He was an American when he was born. And there's no doubt that President Obama's mother is an American.
His father was a British subject, and therefore he would have bestowed essentially that citizenship onto his son.
When he was a young man, had his parents stayed together, would have had the option to take British citizenship rather than American when he turned 18. He did not do that. His father, in fact, had disappeared many years before, so it never arose. But it's quite common if someone is either born in another country, such as Britain, or has one parent from another country, that when they are of age, that they can choose the citizenship. Now, actually, you don't have to choose anymore.
If he was born in Hawaii, if, and I say if because there's a lot of controversy regarding where he was born. We haven't seen the solid evidence of it, although Hawaii says that he has a birth certificate there and that they've confirmed that he was born there. But because of all the other contradictory evidence that has been produced throughout these last 4 years, for example, statements by his family, statements by government officials in Kenya, newspaper accounts, brochures that Obama was personally involved in regarding his biographies and things, you know, saying he's born in Kenya. No hospital really saying, yes, he's born in Hawaii. No medical record of any sort, no witness of any sort.
To quell the rumors, I think it was in June 2008, they put this certificate of live birth up on the campaign website. And it was just, when you first looked at it, I mean, you didn't even need an expert on there. You could see it was a phony. It was a fraud.
The original birth certificate was never really examined. We just have to take the word of Hawaii, but we don't know based on what are they saying that he was born there, because we don't have a hospital saying that they knew who Obama was or even his mother.
They kept calling that the birth certificate. They called that the birth certificate, even though it was a certificate of live birth, which is different. They called it that until August 27th, 2011. So Obama, now he's elected, he's president. There was so much pressure in the early 2011 from who? From Trump. Finally, on August 27th, Obama comes into the press room and with this document says, "This is my birth certificate." And now this is his birth certificate, not the certificate of live birth, which he provided 4 years earlier. So what's what? I always said, prove me wrong, Obama. Give permission to go to Hawaii, to the records, the official records, with a camera crew, and we'll get them to open the records, and we'll see what's there. And if it's there, and if it's justified that you really were born there, I'll walk away. He never would do that. He hasn't allowed anyone to do anything because he's a fraud. The documents he has put out, you just can look at them because it's not the original documents, number one. Number two, the type on there is not the same. On the basic surface of it, without going into the details on it, it's a phony.
You know, I can't go to a motor vehicle agency or get a passport or whatever, open up my laptop and show them an electronic birth certificate. And they're gonna say, oh yeah, you're good to go, okay? Why should the president be able to do that?
For myself, this began when an associate of mine, who was at one time a competitor in my field of business when I ran an internet company, sent this document to me on the day of the release, and I was paying absolutely no attention to it at the time. I looked at it and said, oh, that's a forgery, and I sent him back a quick email, and my comment to him was, you're playing with me, right? When I first pulled it up and looked at it on the screen, it looked funny. It just had characteristics on immediate visual inspection that said to me there was something wrong with it. But the things that immediately struck my eye were that scans are typically not perfect in their alignment. They're not perfect in terms of how how a page feeds through a scanner or sits on a flatbed. So there are normally some things that are slightly out of registration, things that just don't make a lot of sense when you look at them. And if you scan a piece of paper, you'll see this. This was too good, and that was the thing that immediately threw me. Was it was beyond photographic quality in terms of how some of these elements were put together. And as soon as I opened it up in some of the tools, the standard Adobe tools, I looked at it and said, okay, that's not a scan. It can't have been generated that way.
Carl, you've said that one of the things that immediately jumped out at you when you examined the electronic scan of President Obama's birth certificate was the apparent appearance of kerning. What do you mean by kerning?
Okay, kerning is a computer technology that makes text, or typesetting technology for that matter, that makes text more pleasing and easy to read. What kerning does is look at the width of a letter compared to the width of the letters both before and after it, and makes a decision as to how much space to leave between letters so that it is easier for your eyes and your brain to process. Computers and typesetters can do this because computers can look back at what you typed before, and then they can also look forward at what you typed afterwards and adjust the spacing. A typewriter is not capable of doing this.
People who analyze documents have looked at it and said that there's evidence of what's called kerning in the way that some of the information is typed on the lines, and that is where space is left between letters or just enough space so that it looks pleasant to the eye. And that you can't do that on a manual typewriter, only through some sort of word processor or through Adobe and so forth. What do you make of these document people are offering up as evidence that it was a forgery?
Not much, actually, not any. I don't think that variations in the typing make that much difference. I remember having manual typewriters myself way back when, and some of them had variable spacing, some of them didn't, but it's totally possible that that sort of thing would have been in use in that hospital.
Now, what is about that electronic birth certificate? First of all, we're talking about being president of the United States, number one. You got to give more than an electronic image to some kind of controlling authority that your paperwork is in order. You know, I can't go to a motor vehicle agency or get a passport or whatever, open up my laptop and show them an electronic birth certificate, and they're going to say, oh yeah, you're good to go. Okay? Why should the president be able to do that?
It's sad to say the requirements of running for president of the United States don't have the safeguards in there that states have for things like driver's licenses, for applications for jobs and things like that. There's no requirement for someone running for president that they produce documentation to show that they're eligible. I guess he feels like this country, most people could care less, but people do care. But a lot of people are more worried, about their kids going to school, paying their bills and food and stuff like that. But the fact is, he couldn't even get a job with the federal government because he has not shown enough information to qualify for a job with the federal government, or he couldn't qualify to get a job in his own administration because of the questionnaires they put out that you had to fill out to be considered for a position in his administration.
For those people who want to be on the other side of this debate, that want to say, this thing's authentic, shut up and go away, show me the process. That's all I or anybody else want to hear.
And people say many times, well, the worst part would be we'd have a disaster in this country, if he had to step down. And I say, no, I think it would show that the right way to do it is that democracy works here and that he would be out of office because he's constitutionally not eligible to be president.
The Constitution does not define a natural-born citizen. So where is it found, the definition of a natural-born citizen? In common law.
The constitutional dilemma, I think, would be less if that happened, even now, than for him to continue in office as a fraud.
That's American common law, not English common law. Where does that American common law come from? It comes from the law of nations.
This can have vast implications from years from now, because it now allows other people to come into this country that are not constitutionally eligible, but for them to just say, I am constitutionally eligible.
What is the law of nations? There's a body of law that goes back many, many millennia, goes back to the Roman Empire, where they actually created law that was common to all people in all nations. And they believe it came from God. That's where this law came from. It was good for all humanity. That's where the definition comes in from. Now, the definition is confirmed by Vattel. Emir de Vattel in 1758 wrote a famous treatise called The Law of Nations. That Vattel and his treatise, very, very influential in the making of America.
For those people who want to be on the other side of this debate, that want to say, this thing's authentic, shut up and go away, show me the process. That's all I or anybody else want to hear. Mary Zabest has been on this. She is a person who's written several books on Adobe, and she makes the same point. She can't reproduce it. I tried, and as I said, I've been working with these products for well over a decade. I can't come up with anything that produces any sort of document that has any reasonable facsimile to the structure that's internal to what we see within this birth certificate.
The debate as to who is and who is not a natural-born citizen, and therefore who is and who is not eligible to run for President of the United States, is complicated, and it requires a sophisticated knowledge of the documents and treatises that influenced the framers of the Constitution. For example, Those who conclude the Founding Fathers looked to the law of nations or the principles of natural law by Emmerich de Vital for their definition of natural-born citizen stand on pretty solid ground when they argue Barack Obama does not qualify. On the other side of this acrimonious debate, those who insist the framers of the Constitution were influenced more by William Blackstone's commentaries on English common law could mount a convincing and compelling counter-argument. To dismiss those in the birther movement, such as Phil Berg, a registered Democrat and a member of the NAACP, as a racist because he believes Obama does not meet the constitutional requirement, is, in my opinion, extremely unfair. The evidence suggesting the electronic scan of President Obama's long-form birth certificate is a forgery is not conclusive, but it is interesting and deserves further investigation and serious media scrutiny. If the current occupant of the White House is not a natural-born citizen, regardless of his place of birth, if documents were forged, the United States would be plunged into a constitutional crisis unparalleled in its history. If the birthers are wrong, then an apology is in order. And going forward, future candidates for the most powerful elected office in the world might be advised to have their paperwork in order. And now I'd like to know what you think. You can contact me through my website, theconspiracyshow.com. In the meantime, don't be afraid.